Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the Saroy channel. I just want to say that thank you from the bottom of my heart to each and every one of you, because you guys are just utterly phenomenal. I know of no other words to describe you. I mean, I have just been so encouraged and so supported by every one of you, and I am just so blown away by your kindness. And I have now got over 1,000 subscribers, and I can't believe it. I'm just like pinching myself. Is this actually true? And it's just so exciting, and it's all because of you. It's all down to you and your support of my channel. And I don't know how to thank you enough. It was so funny because there was one YouTuber that was actually saying to me, he said, you know, I sit down with my cup of coffee, listening to my favorite YouTuber and, you know, relaxing and listening. And I just thought, wow, you have no idea how that compliment just blew my mind. I was just so warmed in the cockles of my heart by such an incredible compliment, because that's exactly what this channel is about. It's about bringing entertainment to people's lives and interesting stories that are fascinating and curious. And you make doing this such a privilege and such a pleasure. I remember the first time that I actually got a thumbs down, I just thought, oh dear, have I done something really bad? And then I realized that this was a natural phenomenon, and there isn't a channel out there that doesn't have hundreds of thumbs down. And so if you actually do get a thumbs down, actually you're doing something right, funnily enough. But all I just wanted to say to you guys is that you have been utterly phenomenal, and I just send you loads of love. You are, I just think the Bigfoot Brigade are just amazing. And I just have to say, I just adore Americans, and I adore Canadians, and I adore the hairy man. So you guys make what I do incredibly fun. Thank you so, so very much. Now, enough self-indulgence, and let's get started with the story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my name is Juliet, and I live in the beautiful steamy mountains of Colorado, about 170 miles from Denver, in a very remote old miner's log cabin that was built in the early 1800s. It possesses a great deal of rustic charm and character so commonly seen in older buildings that bear the hallmark of a long history behind them. I have always preferred old homes because the character and energy from eras gone by somehow is entrenched in the atmosphere of a building, much like when you see an old long-lived tree that has well outlived us and stands tall, proudly and majestic, towering into the heavens in splendid repose. People so often run their hands down these massive trunks of these aged trees in awe and fascination, intrigued and seemingly mesmerized by something that has possibly lived generations before they were even born. Quite a sobering thought, really. Back to my story, which happened in the summer of 2003. I live on a high mountainous elevation surrounded by acres of natural forest, largely comprised of bristlecone pines, aspen trees, blue spruce, white firs, and limber pines. I live way off the beaten track with no neighbours for miles around, and it literally takes me 45 minutes to climb down our high hilly elevation in order to get to the dirt road that virtually takes us into Denver from all our shopping excursions. The one question I get asked by so many is, why do I live in such a remote area so far away from everything? And the answer is because I love it out here. I've never ever been interested in large crowds and hectic schedules, but love the freedom and spontaneity of life out here. And I enjoy and respect all the animal life that frequent our woods. And believe me, we have many animals here, from raccoons, squirrels, white-tailed deer, moose, and the list goes on forever, including the obvious predators like coyotes, wolves, mountain lions, black bears, and bobcats. I've always wanted to raise my girls in this beautiful country air. And after my husband died so tragically 5 years ago in a small plane accident, I knew that this kind of lifestyle would be perfect to raise my kids, whom I chose to homeschool, so we could embrace this amazing lifestyle together. I have 2 girls at the time, Erica, who was 12, and Linda, who was 15. My story begins when one night after eating dinner and sitting by the fire playing cards and drinking hot chocolate, we were startled by the most terrifying noise on our cabin. It truly sounded like a herd of rhinos was charging our cabin in a thunderous rage. Everything was rattling, shaking and vibrating as if our house had been hit by a violent tornado. Whatever this thing was, it was monstrously big. We could not imagine what this thing could possibly be. Moose can sometimes make a loud noise if they bump into your cabin accidentally, and they rattle it for a bit. But this was no moose, nor was it a black bear. We could not imagine what we were dealing with. This thing, whatever it was relentless in its banging, and truly I felt like a mouse in a small hole being ambushed by hundreds of cats that were about to prize me out with their paws, and there was no hope of escape. My children were absolutely terrified and were certain that we were going to be eaten by this mysterious predator, but I assured them I would kill it instantly if it dared to break into our home with my 9mm revolver. As you can imagine, we could not call law enforcement because it would have taken them at least 2 hours just to get to our house. Yet my confidence was at an all-time low because somehow the energy of this thing was extremely powerful. It made those low guttural growls and grunts that were so piercing they literally went right through me. All I knew in my heart that was pounding violently in my chest was that I wanted to scream out as loud as I could, but I bit my tongue because I did not want to escalate the inevitable terror that my children were clearly feeling by letting them know just how terrified I actually was. It was an awful predicament to be in. I'm glad to say eventually the creature just went away, and we were so relieved. But I never got to a stitch of sleep that night, for the fear of this creature had just robbed me of any of that. The following morning I noted the damage caused by the animal that had completely vandalized the sides of our house, disturbing the filler between the wooden beams, as well as lifting large sections of wood off the timber. I knew that the creature must have been at least 8 foot tall, judging by the height of the damage, and at least 500 pounds. We also saw 16-inch muddy footprints in the soil. We knew that whatever this thing was, it was most certainly a monster. We had always felt safe until then in the woods, so for a while we felt a little unsettled in our home, as you can imagine. But a couple of weeks later, normality did resume in our home, and thoughts of the terrifying creature had been tucked away in our minds and hopefully long since forgotten. It was on a Sunday morning I decided that we should go for a hike in the woods and take a lovely picnic, and that's exactly what we did. I made some ham and cheese rolls, potato crisps, chocolate brownies, and packed bottles of Coca-Cola, and off we went on our hiking trip. I parked my car close to the hiking trail, and I carried my 9mm gun with me, some bear spray, and an air horn. I have to say it was such a gloriously beautiful day, and it was a day that needed to be spent outdoors. The woods were so pretty and dappled with glorious sunlight that literally twinkled cheerfully through the forest canopy, and there was such a happy ambience in the wood. We watched a cheeky little squirrel teasing a couple of turkeys by darting up and down the tree, and they were loving the interaction. I promise you, turkeys do feel incredible joy. I witnessed it that morning. My children and I were laughing so much, and we sat down on the clearing to eat a light luncheon. As we were eating, I suddenly had a very ominous feeling that something was incredibly wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what that actually was. I know I should have listened to my gut immediately, but I pushed my reservations away, telling myself very sternly to stop being so melodramatic. Yet I could not stop those uneasy feelings from resurfacing and re-emerging like an uninvited guest that was robbing us of having a good time. Quite suddenly it seemed like the sparkling sunlight had faded to be replaced by a bleak darkness that seemed to creep over the forest like a meandering grey foggy cloud. I noticed everything had become incredibly still and deathly quiet, almost as if the sound system in the forest had been switched off for an instant. Suddenly we smelt the most repugnant, vile smell that you could ever imagine smelling, and it literally caused our eyes to water and our noses to burn. In the dark shadows of the forest, I suddenly saw something watching me, and it was monstrously huge. It was eyeing me through the brush, and its eyes were so piercing they physically felt like laser beams going through your body. This colossal, abhorrent creature had such a formidable, menacing presence that felt incredibly evil. So I told my kids that we needed to make tracks and get back to the car because I sensed a horrible malaise in the woods. It was not long before we came to a spot on the forest floor where the whole area was literally covered with about 80 rounds of large shotgun shells, almost as if someone had engaged in a major shootout, and the shells were scattered in all kinds of precarious directions. And my first horrified thought was, what in God's name happened here? I then discovered a shoe lying on the ground, a torn, bloody t-shirt, and a large human femur bone. As you can imagine, I knew at once that this person had engaged in a shootout and had ended up dead after trying to defend himself from a deadly predator. It was the most horrifying revelation, and my children and I just looked at each other in absolute disbelief, hardly daring to believe what we were just witnessing. Suddenly something started to throw large rocks at us, and then I turned around to see the most hideous evil creature you could ever imagine laying eyes on. This creature was an anachronism to our world, but it is what you would expect to see stalking up the very flames of hell with a pitchfork. There was not an ounce of kindness or compassion in those brown eyes that glowed with a menacing red eyeshine. He was covered all over with coal-black hair that was so black it was almost blue. It looked like the Incredible Hulk in its monstrous size, and it was easily over 9 foot tall and 800 to 900 pounds and 5 to 6 feet wide. The creature could have easily taken down a tiger and won that battle with no problems at all. That is how powerful he appeared to me. The only way I can describe him is looking like a giant-like, human-like ape who wanted to leave at once, and his expression said only one thing to us, and it was, "Get out!" I just froze and could hardly move. I was so incapacitated by the most horrifying fear, so my children literally pulled me forwards, but they were beginning to run, which I knew was the very worst thing that they could do, because that creature would immediately attack us if we started running away, which is an instinctive reaction from most predators. I had no doubt about that in my mind. I could hear the creature growling with a low guttural growl, and heavy breathing, making the strangest cacophony of sounds, and I started to scream at the creature, shouting at the top of my lungs for it to shut up and to go away. "Shut up! Go away! Shut up! Go away! Go away!" And for a moment the creature did shut up, but it still threw stones at us. But finally we made it back to the car, and I got inside and just raced away, not daring to look back even once. I did have the human femur bone in my basket, along with the bloody t-shirt and shoe, as well as the gunshot casings, and we drove to the police station immediately to tell them what we had found in the woods, but I made no mention of the ape-like humanoid in case they thought it was that I was some kind of a crackpot, or nutcase, so to speak. The police checked the area thoroughly and did a whole investigation, and I gather they believe the death was caused by a rogue wild animal, like a mountain lion, but there was no mention or ever even suggesting that the creature was actually a Bigfoot, although there may be people who were in the force who had their suspicions about that, but wisely kept their mouths shut at the time. All these years later, the human femur bone, bloody t-shirt and missing shoe were finally identified as belonging to a lone hunter who had gone deer hunting in the woods close to my cabin and subsequently went missing and sadly never returned home. So my heart goes out to that poor, poor family. You would think my stories of cryptid tales would end here, but sadly you would be very wrong. Living where I do in the middle of nowhere means I have seen things that would make your hair curl, and that cannot be rationally explained. Some of them that I just can't even begin to describe. Several weeks after our Bigfoot experience on that hiking trail, My daughters and I were coming back from a shopping trip to Denver, as Linda was now turning 16. We wanted to celebrate her birthday in style by inviting people to a barbecue the following weekend. We needed to do a whole lot of grocery shopping, buying beef patties, chicken drumsticks, and all kinds of goodies that you invariably always need for a festive party. My children and I got carried away on our shopping trip to Denver, a rather unfortunate side effect of a female shopper with an eager eye for a good deal. I was buying a very pretty dress for my daughter to wear for her special day, and time just ticked by so very fast. I'm not the most confident nighttime driver at the very best of times, but it had grown dusky incredibly fast, so I had no choice but to make the journey home with considerable less visibility on the roads. Some of those roads at dusk are so treacherous, let me tell you. We were about 15 minutes from our remote cabin on the dirt road when my highlights lit up this enormous, most terrifying beast standing in the middle of the road. What on earth was this dreadful thing? I wondered to myself in horror. There are no words to describe this hideous, malevolent beast to you, because if it had worn a pair of horns, I would have believed it was the devil himself staring at me face to face. That is how terrifying this encounter actually was. This was, however, not to be the case. This hideously demonic-looking beast was absolutely colossal in size and had the distinct facial appearance of a large black German Shepherd dog. Only this creature's head was about twice the size of a German Shepherd's head. It was bipedal and walking on 2 long legs. I would say it was about 7 foot tall, 4 foot wide, and 300 to 400 pounds. One thing that horrified me was the long paws that it possessed and the sharpest talons it had that I have ever seen, that would literally shred you apart without any problems. This creature glared at me with a pair of monstrous red eyes. It snarled and curled back its hungry lips to reveal the grisliest-looking dagger-like incisors that I have ever seen in my entire life. I slowed down the car and suddenly braked, only because if I tried to run it down, I figured that it would only serve to antagonize the creature further, causing me greater problems. All I remember is that this horrifying thing was parked in the middle of the road like a frozen statue, not moving at all. It then let out a ferocious growl that sounded exactly like a lion, and it was so horrifying in its volume and its intensity that my 2 sleeping kids arose from their sleep, and when they saw the creature in the road, they were screaming at the top of their lungs, "Go, Mum! Go! Go! Please go!" I pressed down the accelerator and nearly ran down the creature, but it dived onto the bonnet, and he was growling at us through the windscreen and walking all over my moving vehicle while I was driving, never losing its balance once. My kids continued to shriek, encouraging me to rev up the engine, which is what I did in the hope that the increased speed would cause the creature to fall off the car. "Go, Mum! Go! Go! Go now!" We got to the mountainous embankment that takes us 45 minutes to climb up in order to get back to our cabin, so that is a long journey, so I had to park my car, and we did sit there in silence, and no one said a word, because the terror in my car was so incredibly electric, you could literally feel it. That's how palpable it was. To be safe, I waited for a good hour with the kids in the car to make sure the creature was actually gone. Everything outside was so still and quiet, and I heard no owls, coyotes, or even crickets, but I wasn't even thinking about that at the time, which on reflection was exceedingly foolish of me, because that should have warned me that something was seriously wrong. Finally, with a cautious act of willful courage and looking over both of my shoulders earnestly, I finally opened the car door very, very slowly and quietly stepped out. My wise daughter Linda begged me to call the police and for us to stay in the car until they came, even if we had to stay there all night long. But I saw no signs of the ugly critter, so I told my children it had gone and it was now terribly safe, but I spoke too soon. I proceeded to gather all the shopping bags that contained the meat packages because I knew they needed urgent refrigeration. My anxious children warily climbed out of the car, their senses heightened by extreme fear. Suddenly I was ambushed as out of the shadows the creature reappeared like a demon from the fires of hell. He pounced off the car roof with the agility of a domestic cat and mounted me, straddling me down like a lion mounting its kill. Shopping parcels flew into the air like leaves in the wind, littering the ground with withered pieces of plastic. Colossal dagger-like shawls lunged towards my jugular with clear intentions of ripping it out. Instinctively, I protectively covered my neck with my hands, screaming at the top of my lungs, "No! Please, no! No, please!" Sharp incisors pierced into my forearm, so I released my hold over the jugular. The pulsating, throbbing pain momentarily suspended my terror. Linda was throwing parcels at the creature. "Stop!" she shouted. "Please stop!" she screamed. "Stop! Stop! Stop! Don't hurt my mother! Please! No, don't! Please!" Suddenly the intoxicating meaty smells of my meat-like parcels permeated the air with their tempting aromas, successfully enticing the dog-like beast away from me and loosening its hold of me. It bolted towards the parcels like a rabid dog, shredding the meat apart like an apex predator and ravenously wolfing down chicken drumsticks, burger patties, and heavy steaks. Surging with adrenaline, my heart beating violently in my chest, I sprinted back to my car, hurling myself into the driver's seat and pressing down the accelerator so fast and driving off while my tires squeaked, leaving the creature to its Armageddon of shredded plastic packages and bloody meat. I parked my car 15 minutes away from my home. My daughters and I were shaking violently, and we called the police in a state of heightened terror. We waited for them to arrive, and it was the longest, most terrifying wait of our entire life, as every second was like a lifetime. Terrified that the creature would return like a nasty boomerang, between tears and shaking, we remained seriously locked up in our cars, refusing to leave for any reason. We were not taking any more chances. The officers did finally arrive and were absolutely appalled by the scratch marks on the car that were so deeply entrenched in the metal, causing significant damage as long lines of paint had been removed in sharp, lengthy lines. The officers even looked at me and said, "Ma'am, what the heck did you encounter tonight? I've never seen anything so bad like this. You must have encountered a monster out there." Even areas on the roof had been dented by the creature's heavy weight. My weeping bite marks had become very infected, inflamed, swollen and puffy, and a visit to my doctor had him asking all kinds of awkward questions that I did not want to answer. If I told him what I'd encountered, I doubted he would have believed me. He said my bite mark was unlike anything he'd ever witnessed, and I was exceedingly lucky to be alive. I received shots and, of course, antibiotics, and believe me, for 6 months after the event, my arm continued to ache and sometimes was even too hard to lift. I would experience shooting pains, and it was just awful for a very, very long time, because that's how bad the bite actually was. I'm sure you and your listeners possibly think that I'm barking mad not to have sold my house immediately after such a harrowing and bad year in 2003, and maybe I was mad, but I'm pleased to inform you that after that I never had any encounters with either of those two cryptid creatures ever again, and hope I never do. Besides, I refuse to be driven away from my home, which I love. As far as those things are concerned, I'm more than certain that these creatures are living out there in those forests, and I think there are more creatures like that around that literally defy rational explanation and human understanding. Since that experience, nothing surprises me anymore. All I would say to all your listeners is to never underestimate these creatures, because they are terribly sly and incredibly intelligent, seemingly not of this world. I would like to find out if any of your listeners possibly believe that I may have encountered a dogman on my second encounter, or was it something else? I would like to point out I do not remember a tale, but my youngest daughter does say the creature did have one, so I'm going to believe her on that. So all these years later, I still live in my beautiful country abode with my new husband, whom I married 10 years ago. My kids have left home now, but visit me very regularly. I truly believe those shopping bags of meat saved my life that day, so I'm grateful that I lived to fight another day. Well, I just want to say that those are the most extraordinary stories, and I'm sure my listeners are going to agree. I think the first encounter was very definitely a Bigfoot. The second encounter, I'm sure it's a dog man, but I could be wrong. He does sound like he was very, very big. All I can say is I am so glad you are alive, because I truly think that if it wasn't for your shopping bags of meat, I think you would be dead. I think we really can say that without a shadow of a doubt, which is quite a horrifying thought. So I'm very glad that you didn't, succumb to that terrible beast. All I want to say is thank you so much for that amazing story. And to my subscribers, I'm sending you so much love. You guys just really rock. I don't know what I'd do without you guys. You are just amazing friends to me. That's all I can say. You truly are incredible friends. Until next time, goodbye and good night.